Hello, friends, family, significant others, people who have missed us throughout the last few months. I guess, Sean, the last time we did this was November? Or is it December?
Oh man, October, wasn't it?
Oh, really? Dang.
Yeah, November, I don't think we got anything together. And December was December, then just, I don't know. I think one of the things with COVID is we end up working more
You're right.
or longer, or we take longer midday breaks and make up for it in the evening. And it's just been so
Yeah.
hard to get everything organized to get back to this. But finally, hey, we're back. So yeah, we brought a friend of ours, Matt Lance. He's from Toronto. Doesn't go to the Toronto meetup because they're not as cool as this one, but he was willing to stay up to 9-ish his time and, well, to be frank, talk some shit about PHP.
Cool.
But other than that, what's new in the PHP world that you guys have seen? I saw today Taylor tweeted out something about Laravel Nitro. And we were kind of debating what is that. Of course, he's going to rename it because I think there's another.
I just saw that Craft has a thing called Nitro.
Yeah. So
yeah, I don't know. It seems like it's around testing because he shows like 33 tests or whatever it is, 51 assertions run in like under a quarter of a second. So
yeah, I feel like it's a misdirect.
You think it's something else?
Yeah, I feel like
it's probably just using that paratest thing, the parallel testing.
Yeah.
So it just runs super fast.
Yeah, I was telling Sean maybe it's just a bunch of like non-DB tests, testing the sum, subtract, and divide functions. You know. Yeah.
Well, that would make sense.
Yeah. I don't know. I wonder. I mean, like maybe it's just. It could it be a Lumen alternative thing where it's like Lumen never really took off the way that Laravel did. Maybe it's another crack at that type of stuff. Because Nitro to me seems like the name implies that there's some snappiness, it's speedy or it's like explosive or it's powered by Nitro means like it's been injected with speed or it's going supersonic, right? So it must be something to do with speed, unless it's something to do with explosions. Either way, I don't know.
You know what? You just made me realize, like, he's got to rename it, so he's probably going to name it Laravel Sonic.
Oh, yeah.
That'd be a cool name.
But Sonic is already a thing, too.
Oh, really?
It's a search engine. And so if you Google Laravel Sonic, you'll get adapters for Sonic, Laravel packages for Sonic search.
Well, could that be it? Instead of it, like a search, like I know there's Scout, but maybe this isn't. And Scout doesn't work with Elasticsearch out of the box. I wonder if this is like an improvement there that worked with different more packages than just what was it? That third party one. I forget the name. Something Algolia.
Oh yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
I have no idea.
Nitro.
What is new in the PHP world for Matt?
Nothing. That's not true.
You know what? I gotta preface this. It's gonna be the worst show ever.
That's probably true. I'm very tired because I have a 3-month-old baby at home.
Oh wow.
And so I don't care about anything anymore. I'm just begging for sleep all the time. But outside of that, I don't know. I have genuinely been in 5-hour-long meeting days the past 3 days. That's an exact representation of my days.
Uh-huh.
So I haven't looked at code much at all. But what would I say? To be honest, I was actually really interested in what's Nuno's thing, or is it Nuno? I think it's Nuno.
Nuno, yeah. He's like their 4th or 5th employee.
Maduro. Nuno Maduro.
Yeah.
He actually put in a PR to the PHP language to do a different way of doing short form, like short functions.
Oh yeah.
He did the multi-line, and then he was showing another way he was going to pitch how to do them, or that you could do I think it was like an each method going through it. I can't remember all the details of this, but I actually thought that would be cool. I would be very okay with a multi-line, because the fact that you can only do those single line ones with the short functions in PHP seems kind of stupid.
It does seem weird that it's like white space sensitive, right?
Right.
Mhm.
Yeah.
That's not normal.
No.
And that's just weird. Like, why would you? I just personally, I would never even bother to use that. Especially, I hate the FN thing. Like,
Yeah.
come on.
Yeah, and I remember reading about it when it came out, and there was some stuff with like ambiguity around like arrays and stuff, and that's why it needed like the extra keyword or something. Because like arrays use the same arrow, right?
Right.
I saw someone posted the other day about this person was saying, "Oh, I want to call." They were using it was like a collection or something, or like they were doing a dispatch, and they wanted to treat a function as a callable, like just a regular function, like a regular static method as a callable. But you can't really do that. Like you can do that in JavaScript, where if you pass a function without the parameters or without the parentheses, it'll call it depending on how it's being used. If you pass a function without parentheses as an argument to something that will call that function, like a callback, for example, it'll actually run it, and you don't need the extra parentheses. So you can save yourself 2 precious characters. Or some people, I'll see, they'll do an arrow function and call the function when it's like you can delete that whole thing and just literally put the function as the argument. You can do that in JavaScript, and in PHP you can do it if you have a callable class, like an invoke on your class. But you can't do that with static methods. Because if someone's like, "Oh, I wish I could do this," and everyone's like, "Here's a way you can do it," and like there's like 5 different ways to do it, but not the way that the person wants, which is like, yeah. But I mean, I feel like PHP and JavaScript are merging like quite a lot, because like now now JavaScript even has decorators, which are like analogous to annotations, right? In some ways, which is like surprising too. Like, and they have classes, they have private methods now, and then PHP is getting all this stuff with like more advanced typing tools that you can kind of get with TypeScript and JavaScript, or even just like the way that the niceties around like the constructors and stuff with PHP 8, like some more nice stuff there, or like more convenient.
Like some of those things. The PHP 8, I think that's one of the PHP 8 things I was really excited about. And I can never remember these things because
the like lazy constructors, like the auto. What is it? Like, what is it, Sean? It'll like automatically set your private and public properties or something.
Yeah.
I don't remember that one.
Yeah, you can define them as public in line, like in the constructor. So you can, instead of in the constructor, you'd have like user and, role, for example. You could actually put that as a user and a role model, and it'll you set them as public, and then they're suddenly public instead of having to go back and, because the problem that a lot of people had. Yeah, because
the problem people are assigning them.
Yeah. But one of the things, this is a terrible, terrible joke, but with all the things that, all these, I guess, normalizations of the object-oriented language in PHP, or I guess improvement, maturation, if you will, I almost feel like there's somebody out there, because PHP comes from, everybody says, oh, PHP is the worst because it doesn't have all this object-oriented programming and got all this garbage from before. Somebody's going to put together a framework to take PHP 8 and you write it the old school way to help all those, the people that haven't caught up.
Like
it's a terrible joke.
PHP 8?
Yeah. It's a terrible, terrible idea and a terrible, terrible joke, but I almost feel like I could see that happening.
Oh, I forgot to mention the chat. So there's a live chat. So people in the live chat, I'm just looking at it now. I forgot to mention, we can see the live chat. We can interact with you. Sean, I guess you've been typing welcome to all these people, but just letting the people know that you can actually say hello in that chat. We can see that and say hello back.
Yeah. So here, Tyson wants the
property promotion.
Right. And that's
what it is.
Yeah. And that's the empty constructor with public properties will automatically assign them right?
You, instead of having to do, like we have to go and say like public, user, public role
Yeah.
in the as the properties above, and then you set them in the constructor. In this, you can actually say public right beside the class type. So you can actually say like public user. And so then this way you don't have to go write that stupid one line thing at the top of the file.
This user equals user thing?
Yeah.
Okay.
Kind of. The thing I'm more excited about though is that null safe operator. That is probably the most, because then you've defeated the entire use of the optional method. That little optional helper.
Oh yeah.
Poof, gone.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for
I
sure.
think that's really cool.
I use
that's
that.
one that I
love
will use
that
a lot.
optional. I even used data get, array get, and object get just all the time because it allowed me to like clean up a lot of code.
Yeah.
Yeah. Also, don't they have named parameters now? Is that right? You can do named arguments. Sorry. Can't you do that?
Yes.
Yeah, and I never really used it until I started writing some Python, and I was like, oh, this is kind of handy, especially because like you get some old PHP built-in functions that have like some wonky stuff where you're like, oh man, I just want to I don't want to have to like do argument null argument for like some of these.
Yeah,
you could just be like, yeah, argument 1 is this, argument 3 is this, and whatever the middle argument is just the default.
Well, and especially when you look at, if you take a look at like some of Symfony's deeper systems, like the core elements of Symfony, like they'll have methods that require 8 different parameters to them.
Yeah.
And it'll be like 2 variables and then null.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so that'll clean that up. I mean, this is all superficial stuff. Like, it's not like anyone's, like, all we're doing here is like saving some characters. It's a little bit easier to read. It's a little bit more, I guess, quote unquote, modern. I mean, but at the end of the day, it's like, we're saving a line here, a line there. I don't know. I think some people are, what's tough with PHP is that there is so much version disparity around where it's like, and knowing the difference between 7 and 8 and being able to, oh, I can't use this feature here. Oh yeah, I can. Unlike, I've been writing so much JavaScript lately, and since I'm writing TypeScript, I really don't care about the interoperability between is this an ES5 feature, an ES6 feature, or am I using an ES7 feature that's not even able to be used yet? Am I using some wonky stuff with a decorator or something? I don't even care because it's all transpiled in the end, and I just choose my target output. Where PHP is I can't just write PHP 8 all day regardless of my destination for my source, which is maybe that's one of those things that would be nice to see, is that being able to transpile 8 to 6 or 7 depending on the environment that you're targeting. I think it'd be kind of useful. I know you can do wonky things with we had someone present last year. Sean, do you remember the guy who presented about the actor method thing, where you could actually do roles and actors, and it would actually transform your code using annotations? It would actually rewrite your PHP it would parse your PHP and rewrite it. I can't remember what it was called.
Fabio? Was that Fabio who did that?
Yeah, it might have been. Yeah, I don't know if anyone in the chat remembers that talk where you could basically write annotations and it would actually write out PHP code for you based on the input code, and it would basically write these more sophisticated files. It was macros, I guess is what other words you'd call it in other languages, where you writing these you're transpiling your code still, you're writing James's version of PHP over here, and then I'm transpiling it to straight up PHP, and just regular vanilla PHP. But it might be cool to see something like that where I'd love to be able to use saving all those lines, saving all those problems, using that null safe operator, stuff like that, and just have it fall back to whatever environment I'm targeting. So at least when you're doing stuff like open source projects, maybe where you're running, something like Nova, where it's you're just forced to target the lowest common denominator. You don't have the choice to be I want to use PHP 8. It's well, you're you can't do that. You're a victim of the disparity between the PHP versions. So it'd be nice to have something like that where it's like, hey, why don't you write it in 8 and then you have a folder for each version. I mean, like that's kind of what JavaScript does. It's like you have a CommonJS module, you have an ES6 module, and then you have like a browser global like window object or something like that. I think they figured that out where I think it'd be cool to see PHP do that. And at least I think that would drive adoption of new features like almost immediately. As soon as TypeScript has a feature, like I can just use it. I don't have to worry about all this other junk. I just start writing away and I let it compile its thing. And when it goes to the automated build, it just does the thing for me. But working locally on Chrome, I can use native ES6 modules for a year. It doesn't matter. But I wonder if that would help drive some of the adoption of these things that are a bit more bleeding edge.
I wonder because there are a lot of times I'll look at a piece of code and it's not standard. It's got some of that PHP ugliness. And I'm just pulling my hair out.
Yeah.
But I guess if the code is already ugly, you would have to rewrite it in the annotated macro way first. But anyways.
No, I mean, what I'm saying is you write PHP code and then you literally would compile like you'd have PHP, like maybe you have a .php 8 file, and then you actually compile that for PHP 7 or transpile or whatever that terminology is. You transform it from 8 to 7, 8 to 6, or whatever, 8 to 5. And then you don't have to worry, like, it's just built into the compiler to know, okay, well, if I have a splat operator in an array of arguments with a named argument call, like it knows how to transform that down to PHP 6. Which is like a lot of the stuff that we're looking at is purely just niceties. Like the setting public properties constructor thing is really just sugar on top of like putting the public property, opening up a constructor, and then doing whatever this thing equals thing, right? Like it's really just sugar on top of that. So it'd be nice to see. It'd be cool to see that. I mean, who knows? PHP doesn't really do that in any other capacity, but it'd be I think it'd be an interesting way to drive adoption more for some of these like things. Because I think a lot of people, like speaking of hating PHP, a lot of people hate on it because they don't realize that, I mean, we are forced to write to the lowest common denominator. Like a lot of companies are still using like 6 or 5 even, and they are at 5, version 5 of PHP, or they're using older Laravel because of the fact that they're stuck on older PHP. And it's sort of like a vicious circle where, the other programming languages don't have that. Like as soon as the browser hits, they just don't have that issue. For the most part, I mean they do, but it's not nearly as prevalent, I think.
Awesome. Well, we should get into Matt's talk. We've been talking for a little bit here. James, welcome. It's March 2021.
What's that?
I was mostly researching. I'm like, what is this Nitro? It's got to be something. I don't know. I have no idea. And then I found this thing called Nitro Pack, which also looks very interesting. .io. That's worth taking a look at if you're bored. Yeah. So, do you want me to share my slides?
We're just gonna
hold your voice, Matt.
Stuff here, and then
we have a cadence, Matt.
Oh, okay. I don't know these formats.
It's been 1 year since March 2020. It is now March 2021. So blow your let down the sparklers and blow on your kazoo because we made it 1 year of this whole thing. Twitter, if you want to follow us on Twitter, PHP Vancouver, you can follow us there. If you have anything nice to say about the meetup, you can use the hashtag VanPHP. That helps us find stuff, retweet it, etc., etc. YVR Dev Slack. If you haven't heard of it, don't know about it, or you're somewhat interested in just getting into the developer community in Vancouver specifically, you can actually join the YVR Dev Slack. There's a PHP channel. Some channels, I think over the last 6 months or so, it's been a bit of a ghost town, and you'll notice a trend as the weather gets nicer, the computers get ditched. So you might find it's lacking a bit, but there's always people there chatting about different stuff, news items, all this type of stuff, including PHP. So check it out if you're interested. Maybe, Sean, you could talk about this.
Yeah, so, I mean, obviously for sponsors, since we're not hosting the event, we're not needing to order pizza and alcohol like we normally do. But we do welcome sponsors to line James and I's pocket, mainly because we pay for the meetup fees and whatnot.
Yeah.
Wouldn't mind being reimbursed for those. But other than that, we do want to put it back into what we're doing here, whether we take that money and do giveaways or stickers or stuff like that.
Yeah.
So if anybody's interested in sponsoring, by all means, reach out. It'll be on the YouTube channel, and it'll be there for as long as YouTube lives.
Yeah. Till the next competitor comes along.
Yeah.
PHP Storm.
Yeah.
Do we have a giveaway?
Yeah, we have one license to give away. Do this every meetup or a couple meetups that we make. Normally, we will pick a winner from the chat, or pick a random person from the chat. Some of the people have already won. So if you've already won, please, and we happen to pick you out of random, please just let us know and we'll move on to the next person.
I was actually thinking of doing something slightly different for this one. I think people who want to be entered into the chat should put their email into the chat. Because what we've had in the past is we've messaged the meetup group for like, hey, so-and-so watch this or whatever. Or, hey, this person won. Like we pick a name randomly from the chat. And we can't get a hold of this person. So it'd be nice if people maybe put your email in there. If you're not part of the meetup group, join the meetup group and attend this event as well. So if you do get missed, then we can at least find you that way. So go to the meetup.com, go to the Vancouver PHP meetup group and join the RSP yes to this particular event for March 11th. And we'll be able to find you that way as well if we miss you in the chat. So just keep that in mind. Rocket Plan. So we do have a job post to plug here, right?
Yeah. So I just took a job at the CTO of Rocket Plan. So my job is to grow that team and make that company something special. So some people have worked with me in the past, and they know how I grow teams, how I work with teams. So I think some of those people are in the chat and they can attest to how much they enjoy. Wait, what do you do?
Sorry.
They can attest to how much they enjoy working with me and how awesome I am. I'm not sure whether James or Matt are going to dump on me for saying that, but I am looking for a Laravel PHP software developer, one or many. We're also looking for QA and iOS engineers. Eventually, we'll be looking for Android QA automation, but we're going to grow to get there. But these are our immediate needs. If this speaks to you or you know someone, check out rocketplantech.com and send them that link. There's a career page there, or have them reach out to me on Twitter, Slack. Oh man, I'm almost everywhere. Twitter, Slack, LinkedIn, wherever. I'm not hard to find. So I'm looking to grow and make the team really good.
Sweet. Yeah, just we don't really have audience participation as such as part of the actual presentation part, but we do have this online chat. So if you do have questions or something for the guest, just mention them in the chat. We'll keep an eye on that chat, and we can actually promote any questions in that chat to the actual video. So not only will your question be visible for the presenter and the audience that's watching, but it'll also be archived there in the video. So if you have a question during the talk, just make sure you put it into the chat, and then we can highlight that for our speaker later on when the question comes up. Other than that, say hello and follow along and have a good time. So as Sean said, we have Matt Lance here, and he's going to talk about All Code Must Die.
Let me do what is it? What do you do in the book? The foreword or whatever?
Sure.
So this comment, All Code Must Die, Matt, it might have been the first Laracon that I went to 3 or 4 years ago. And of course we were drinking and we were drinking pops, the good old drinks. And there's a fellow, Eric Van Johnson. He runs the podcast called PHP Ugly, and he runs the meetup down in San Diego. Fantastic guy. So the three of us and probably some other people were sitting around, because I remember every Laracon we would hijack Freak Vander whatever spotty guy, and take him drinking with us on the last day. And Matt, I remember him sitting there. I remember his voice saying it, and he's got a drink in his hand, and all code must die, something like that, and went on some kind of rant. And we were trying to figure out what to talk about in this meetup, and I thought, that's the perfect. I always remember that's the perfect thing that I always reference back to Matt about. Maybe he's going to talk about all code must die, but it's more or less, some of the tips, tricks, lessons learned, failures, successes that Matt has had over the years as a PHP developer. And yeah, so remember this, kid, all code must die.
So Matt, we'll have you share your screen now. You'll be able to select what you want to share. If you're going to be sharing multiple tabs, just be sure to share the whole browser and not just a single tab. And then we'll actually be able to show your video at the same time as showing your camera as well.
Is that working?
Yeah. So Sean, do you want to just shuffle our situation here and get Matt
perfect
by himself there?
Nice. All right, is it go time?
Yep. Sean and I will hide away, and you can get started.
So this talk on all code must die. Partially because Sean messaged me 2 days ago and said, "Hey, do you want to do a talk?" And my response was, "About what?" And I kind of just hacked this together recently, but this actually stems from a blog article I wrote back in 2016. And it's funny to me that I wrote it that long ago because it's still very, very prevalent, at least in my mind, especially with the way things are going. So first off, who am I? I'm Matt Lawrence, and I'm Canadian, but that doesn't matter. I've been writing code for a while. I've worked with Fortune 50, Fortune 500 companies, startups, the whole caboodle. And I'm currently working remotely in my cabin. That's this, which I built literally this summer. It was fun. It was a good time. So, what is the point of all code must die? First and foremost, precogs and The Simpsons are fiction. We need to stop this whole notion of future proof. The whole concept is just insane. If you're asking any developer to predict the future, it's about as useless as asking a weather person, what's the best car to drive in Alaska in October? Who cares? None of it actually matters. The trends and patterns in software development are often fleeting and are built on top of one another. So, you start off with HMVC, and then that builds on to composer packages, and it scales and it adjusts over time. So all the effort that people seem to put towards future proof and budgets that are set towards future proofing projects, fuck it. It's never going to work. It's never going to solve any of your problems. Because if you ever thought 8 years ago that you were going to ever run a Laravel application on a Lambda system on AWS, you'd be considered insane. And yet, vapor. Here it is. So the point of that statement is that almost all of the code that you will write at the beginning of an application will get deleted before the end of your time in that application, depending on how long you're working there and building a single application. And it's slow versus instant. We're not talking about oatmeal. Software, it takes time to develop. I shouldn't even have to explain that. But what's interesting is it takes a long time to grow into something vastly more complex than the original state of things. So code, to me, and this has been my experience anyway, is that you don't really notice how bad it's getting until it's been a reasonable amount of time where you've been able to take a step back and look at the result of your effort. And it's a really important thing to keep an eye on that stuff, because expecting yourself or your team to ever predict or to build for demand that isn't even happening, and expecting yourself to have a system that's going to scale when you don't need to scale right now is kind of crazy. So it's, again, it's work with what you've got, and if you're going to make instant oatmeal, make instant oatmeal. If you're going to make like long-term oatmeal, make long-term oatmeal, but stop trying to shift back and forth. I think we do a lot of this sort of stuff, especially with architectures. We get really locked in on a certain way of doing things and continue down that pattern. And then, you know, where was I going with that? you get really locked into that, and it needs to happen. Like, you need to have those shifts over time. The team I work with currently is about 25 people just on the technical scope of that. There's another 40 or so people that just handle various levels of the organization. It took the project started, the current project that we're working on started with, I think, 4 developers working on it, and it's scaled to 80 people involved in the entire project at this point. So expecting that to, like, that code base to be able to support that many people working on it, it's kind of a ludicrous idea to believe that you could have built the right thing 3 years ago when we started on the project. So we need to stop treating this as a that when you build that first architectural choice, that it's going to stick around the entire time. You have to be willing to delete things, like large amounts of things. And this kind of ties into the whole out with the old, in with the new. And who wrote that? And it turns out there is no thinking emoji. A problem that I see, it plagues a lot of applications and a lot of projects over time, is you have new people coming in and old people leaving. Not necessarily age-wise, just new people in, old people out. And as everybody comes in, they influence a project in their own ways. And, you know, they'll come in with various ideas and patterns that they want to introduce to a project. And then there's people who are part of teams who are actually filled critical knowledge of that just kind of, you know, leave and don't speak a word of the details that they know. And a major problem in this is that a lot of teams don't actually document vast amounts of their own internal application system. There's rarely applications I've seen with actual docs directories that detail out some of those key components that are crucial for new developers coming on board, or old developers who are leaving and are carrying really core knowledge with them as they go. So in order to help prevent a degree of having to, like, destroy your own code, because this is the inevitable side effect of that, is you have a junior developer who will come in and say, I don't know how to work with any of this, so I'm just going to delete it all and write it new. And then you repeat the pattern over and over and over again. So instead of necessarily this time allowing the code to die, documenting it can actually prolong the life of some code structures. Not all, but some. When code is being deleted, it's not deleting your soul. It's just kind of cutting off an ear. We need to stop treating our code as an extension of us, as a part of our inner peace and sanctum. It's just code. It's just something you created. If somebody else needs to delete it over time, or somebody knows a better way of doing something, treat those moments as humbling moments where you get to grow a little bit and it didn't cost you much of anything. This kind of ties back to what I was saying before, in that a lot of developers, at least from what I've seen over my experience, some of them will cling to patterns or architectures and try to hold on to them for forever, which is it's an immediate way of creating code decay. And that'll only continue to escalate over time, because we don't build stuff with CodeIgniter because somebody really was into CodeIgniter. You just don't use it anymore. And if somebody's asking you to work on a project that's made out of code with CodeIgniter, you're going to say, no, I'll rebuild it with Laravel, because it's faster and easier to rebuild it with Laravel than it is to actually adjust and rehash the CodeIgniter stack to do what you're going to want it to do to get the result they're looking for. Part of that process is that when you're going and working on a new component, or somebody is coming to look at a new component, they're looking at it with fresh reviewer eyes. And that's a whole different perspective than when you're the original creator of something. I often write the dirtiest, crappiest code that I can possibly write first, and then spend time refactoring it and tweaking it later, solely for the purpose of getting a little bit of a better version of what I was trying to do in the first place. And part of that is being willing to say, I'm going to make it crappy, and then I'm going to delete it all and write it all over again, or incrementally. Developers don't just write code. We also make coffee. What does that have to do with code dying? Not a whole lot. Pretty much nothing. I just like this slide. On top of that, one thing to really consider is when you start your day off with a fresh cup of coffee, is that not one of the most ideal times to run a bit of a code audit on the stack that you've been working on? And then a great question to ask yourself is, how often does my team ever do a code audit or a performance audit on the projects that we're building? Again, in the notion that all code must die, it's kind of there's a great quote from the movie Shawshank Redemption: get busy living or get busy dying. And in my experience, if you're just continuously working with a code base that is, building active code decay, you're doing the get busy dying instead of the get busy living, and saying there's performance issues all around here, or there's audit critical issues around. Let's refactor these things. Let's rebuild these parts by deleting the code and starting fresh. This is where packages can be our friends, particularly if they have candy. I've worked with a lot of monolith applications, and I've worked a couple times with microservices. I have a mixed perspective when it comes to microservices. I think they can easily scale into far more vast complexity. However, I personally think that there's a bit of a middle way in there, and it's got to be done in just the right way. If you're going to start off with a monolith, as most applications are going to start, that's natural. Like, that's just going to make sense. And you can slowly, as you're building your monolith, or maybe after a period of time and you're in a review phase, you can break that into packages or composer packages. However, ripping entire components out of an application, just jamming them into a package, isn't really solving any sort of problem. You're really just, copy pasting what could be refactored from a very core level up. A great example of this is something I'm going to be working on soon, is rebuilding an entire system for an analytics component in the project we work on. And we're going to do that as restructuring the entire thing as a microservice, instead of it being all over the place in different parts of a monolithic application. So the key to this is that if you go on the overboard path and just rip a bunch of parts of your application out, jam them into packages, and expect that to be just as maintainable as your monolith, it's not. It's just gonna, you're taking the code decay that was here and just moving it over here, and it's still gonna escalate. You're better off to actually say, the moment that something is gonna come out of the core and become something else, write it from scratch. Let that code in the system as it is die, and let it be rebuilt as something new, because salvaging isn't refactoring. Salvaging is just, like I said, it's promoting code decay. It's promoting stress for the rest of your life. Simplicity is the ultimate sophistication. Again, I really like this quote. It's a tall order. When you're taking a project and having it grow over time and seeing that there are moments where that code has to be destroyed or has to be rebuilt, it's really hard to make those judgment calls. And I think it's a really important thing to be willing. It's not like, climb up on the hill and die on the hill for this sort of situation, but we can easily get into a pattern where you think that, oh, I can just simply update this little thing, or I can simply adjust this. And in reality, even though it may not seem simple at first, rebuilding it is actually going to result in a more simple solution down the road. Something to consider. Avoiding dependencies. Stop that. Just write less code. And that sounds a little silly, but there's a really key point here. Oftentimes, I see a lot of applications kind of hoard various packages because they're going to solve little problems, or, ooh, we're going to run into that down the road, I think. I'm going to grab it now. I'm going to work with that new package or that new dependency. And you kind of start heading down a bit of a slippery slope with this, because as soon as you've got hundreds of dependency packages and you've got a single package which has now become abandoned, what do you do? Like, are you now going to then fork that and maintain it yourself, which is now taking on a whole other layer of tech debt? Or are you now going to try and refactor that entire, component of your application, or where it's impacting components of your application? Keeping yourself on a little bit of a strict pattern of only pulling in dependencies when you really need them is really the best way to help prevent some code decay, and then at the same time help you have to rewrite less code or have less of your code die. I think Adam Wathan is the best person to use as the example for this, because when he developed Tailwind, he was exactly solving a problem of, when I have to go back and rewrite entire SCSS files or entire UI components, it's a nightmare, and maintaining them is a nightmare, and it only ever becomes a mess that you have to then destroy the whole thing and rewrite it. Whereas you use something like Tailwind, you can maintain the granularity, and the granularity can only change as frequently as the browser support changes, which is really not as frequent as, let's say, version releases that happen every 6 months. So I think there's a real fine line of avoiding dependencies and utilizing dependencies, utilizing dependencies. And it needs to be taken a little more cautiously than some people do. So what are the takeaways? Stop trying to future-proof your code, because it's never going to happen. Build packages versus components. Components is just simply copy-paste, whereas the package is actually solving a problem in a new way and is a completely different solution than the original solution was. Or not completely different, but a different pattern or a different approach. Auditing your code should be the norm. You should be willing to look at code bases and say, all this has to be deleted. And if that means you have to delete it in 6 months from now, that's fine. But you really should be spending some time ripping apart your own code and saying what's crappy and what isn't, or to the best of your knowledge. If other people want to delete your code, don't take it personally. It's not an attack on you. It's not an attack on the work that you've done. It's looking at a system and saying, there's a better way now. here it could be. And maybe it's not. Maybe sometimes people who try to delete your code are doing a worse solution, in which case, work with them to find a better way to do it. And write less code. A great example of this, again, outside of things like Tailwind and avoiding other dependencies, instead of trying to create over-engineered solutions where you're quote, heading towards the future-proof layer, just write less code. Write only what's necessary to get the job done, and then move on. And if you can kind of follow that kind of a pattern, even though, yeah, all your code is eventually going to get rewritten anyway, hopefully it's less frequent, or at least you're doing more adding instead of deleting. Thank you. I'm on Twitter and GitHub, obviously. And I'm open for questions.
Yeah, well, thank you, Matt. I think we can talk shit about your talk now.
Thank you, because I wrote it an hour ago.
I'm glad you respect us so much. But yes, I would love to hear some opinions and questions from the chat. I'd love to hear if people think Matt is full of crap. It's
Which
an
you're
opinion.
entirely entitled to.
Exactly, it's an opinion piece. And one of the things that as you were going through the talk that I keep thinking about is when I got started with Laravel, I remember pulling up a package by Matt Lance, and I forget the name of it, but it was that CMS admin package or whatever, and you were using these design patterns, repositories, and services. So now, yes, Quark. Thank you. I started using that in my own packages, and I started teaching people, hey, we should have a repository, we should have a service. And then they ended up really getting to the point that a lot of my controllers were loading a service, which then loaded a repository, which then did the eloquent call. And I was like, oh, why didn't I just convert all this into a base class that I extended? And so then I was making... Then I just ended up never using... I kept falling back to the base class. Like the base class did everything for me. And then I'm like, well, why do I need these layered of abstraction? So I'm like, get rid of it. And Laravel does a really good job of making it simple and giving you...
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead. Or
I was going to say, it's not just Laravel. There's a lot of packages and code structures that it's really easy. Just use it directly. I think a lot of times developers get into a pattern where they want to abstract things a little bit more or a little bit differently. And the more you attempt to do large scale abstraction, the more you are heading down a very slippery slope, and it will hurt exponentially worse when you have to then splice out from a vastly over-convoluted abstraction. I'm saying that with very first-hand experience, with details I can't talk about, but I can say that we're dealing with a very complex abstraction right now in terms of data storage that is extremely messy and is not pleasant to transition to a different state.
What you're talking about is like that thing that I'm sure we've all come across, which is like, it's not complicated because it was complex. It was complicated because someone didn't know what they were doing, or they didn't know how to approach the problem, or something changed in the middle of the project. And the complexity, like the problems that I've come across where I'm like, wow, this is a mess. It's not because we're not doing rocket science here. None of us are on the bleeding edge of any industry for the most part. Unless we're on that bubble on top of the bleeding edge of something that's actually, we're discovering new technology. Most of the time, the stuff we're doing is like, hey, what kind of for loop are you writing? Or like, hey, what's, stuff like that. It's really not that special, no matter how special every startup wants to be. It's more like the problem got complicated because they let it get complicated, not because it was actually complex. I sound like I'm a snake eating its own tail, but complexity and being complex are not the same thing.
Right. It's an induced complexity because of the wish to not have to refactor or rewrite things in the future.
Right.
And I think you should actually promote the reverse of that. I think you should actually promote, be prepared in 2 years that whatever you wrote today is crap and you need to rewrite it, or you need to rethink it and re-envision it, because it's also the nature of business in and of itself, because the business demands of today are not the business demands 5 years from now or 1 year from now. They're different. So why would anybody think that the solution you introduced today is still going to be, optimal in a year from now?
Well, I mean, Sean and I have firsthand experience of that in startup that we worked in together. Where like, I think most people who are, it's usually a non-technical perspective, but I think it applies to technical people as well. Is that they think the growth and complexity of their app is actually linear. Like, oh, it's a linear problem that happens. It's not linear. It's a step function. Every business change, you get this huge step in complexity, and that complexity translates to a new project, a new feature, a new package, or whatever that happens to be. But like in my experience, and looking back at the startups that I've worked at, and at this point, there's a handful. And I'm sure Sean, maybe, I don't know, we haven't talked about this before, but I wonder if you've had the same experience, and Matt as well, is that I at all the startups that I used to work at, they rewrite their whole thing. I'm using that term loosely, but they do a large reassessment or refactor or rewrite a large swath of the application every 3 to 5 years. So that means that, like you said, like planning for future proofing is like, I think what everyone's definition of future is going to be different, but I think what the idea is that there's no point in one, if you're a team of 10 people, don't think about what a team of 100 people is going to be, because that's going to be a radically different makeup of not only the company, but the complexity of the business is going to change as well. And like the complexity of the customer is going to change. Sean and I worked at a company where we had some very sophisticated customers who literally drove the design and development of the entire application in spite of what the larger swath of smaller customers actually needed. But that was a different relationship with the application. Either way, every 3 to 5 years, it was like, well, it's been 3 years now, so we better go ahead and throw out all the garbage. And I've been telling the team that I work with now that, hey, don't think about what's going to happen in 10. Like, if you ever find yourself thinking about what's going to happen in this time, in this much time, in 10 years, when the team's twice as big, 5 times as big, it's like you're not solving today's problem. You're trying to solve tomorrow's problem, and you don't have all the information you need to solve tomorrow's problem.
Right.
So I definitely feel the same way.
And I think we also kind of get, and when I say we, I mean I think developers in general get a little offset, or we get a huh?
Sorry? We can hear you.
Who
Matt?
are you talking to?
Oh, okay. Sorry, I stopped talking to Sean. Sean said something, I thought, and I was like,
maybe you got a delay there.
Oh, anyway, so what I was going to say is one thing I think that happens, and I think it happens very easily, it's an easy kind of thing to stumble into, is when you look at variety of packages that we use, right? And a lot of them are good and are very granular. They're very small problems that they solve, and they're constantly evolving and constantly changing them. But even you take the fly system or whatever, the file one, whatever he calls it. He did a complete rewrite for the new version just recently.
Yeah.
From the ground up, and that's okay for a one person to take on board and go with, because it's such a tiny granular thing he's focused on. Whereas with larger applications, we get the idea that we can make it that you don't have to do that. Mm-hmm. And that's a kind of a weird way to think about things, is that because it's so big, you don't have to. Like, where'd that come from?
Right. Yeah, I always use analogies for like houses and cars because most people understand that they're like they seem simple, but then as soon as you start diving a little bit deeper, it gets radically more complicated. Like, I always think about building a house versus building an apartment, which is like they both solve a similar problem, but the undertaking for the house, or like you're talking about, you just built your sort of your little cottage, which is like your problems, the ecosystem and the sphere in which your problem surface area is this. Building an
Mhm.
apartment is
Astronomically bigger.
a titanic undertaking.
Yeah.
But like you don't think about like, well, what happens when I have 7 tenants here? What happens when
Yeah.
there's 10 floors above me? Like, no,
Exactly.
that's ridiculous. If you later on want to say, hey, I want to double the size of my cottage, or you know what, you have 2 more employees, you want to add space, like that's a problem for that time, which
Yeah.
I think, and I mean the car thing is that I used to tell clients, this is when I was doing a lot of WordPress. I would tell them like I had this little speech that was like, WordPress is not a truck. If you want a truck, you better buy a truck. Don't buy a car
Yeah.
and put a trailer and big wheels and a roof rack on. That is
Yeah,
not
that
a truck.
4-cylinder engine ain't gonna do anything.
Yeah, it's not going to do it. You could try to make it into a truck. You can paint a flame on the side. You can put a roof rack on. Like you can put a trailer behind it, but it's
Yeah.
not a truck. If you want an F-250 diesel dually, you want something significant. You have to. That's a next level investment, though. So
Right.
it works on so many levels of like, what is that? And I think developers sometimes, like being someone that worked as a contractor and owned a business and understood more deeply like the relationship between the business and their customer and their client, specifically with service industry stuff, is that like they're not buying A plus sometimes. Like
Right.
we didn't sell them A plus, we sold them B plus.
Yeah.
So it's like we need a B plus solution, which is good enough. Not great is the expectation. But that's all it comes down to, that personal thing, like taking things personally, right? Like I'm just an employee. Like this isn't my personal project. If you want to delete my stuff, like okay, like let's just delete it and do a new thing. I get paid either way. I don't really
Yeah.
you know.
Let's go to one other comment here from John.
What do you say, Sean?
Yeah.
Yeah. So John, great talk, Matt. Any more insights on what you have to see in the code to decide rewriting?
Oh, that's a good question. To decide rewriting over refactoring it. What would be red flags?
Well, what does maybe just what do you what's the threshold for you for a rewrite versus a refactor?
That's a really
I think I have an idea for me personally what a refactor is versus a rewrite.
Sure, you go first.
A refactor for me means let's live in the perfect world where we've TDD'd everything or something like that. I don't have to redo the test. That to me is a refactor. The test is the same.
Yeah. I mean that would be the difference, but that would be the difference between them. But like in terms of deciding when to do one versus the other, I don't think there's any real distinctive flag point where you can say, oh, well, that's obviously should be that until, and this sounds so dumb, until it literally is that obvious. A great case is, and I'm going to use this one because this is the most recent, is if no one on your team can distinctively sit there and say, oh, I understand that from top to bottom, well, then it's time to rewrite it. You know, if no one on your team knows this analytics component from top to bottom, then rip the whole thing out and rewrite it.
So your threshold isn't even necessarily the technical threshold. It's like a knowledge threshold.
Well, most of it ends up being knowledge. I mean, the technical details of most code are like it's semantics in a lot of cases. Like a lot of refactoring is, oh, I've refined this from not collections into collections. Like that's a refactoring. Or if you can, those are what I would consider like performance auditing almost, where you're kind of exploring different, jankety code that you think could be a little cleaner, a little nicer. That's your refactoring phase. I think of rewrites as there's a knowledge gap in what was or what is or what wants to, like what it's supposed to be doing, and so you have to go to the point of a rewrite.
One of the things I would add also is when your technical debt, the interest you're paying,
yeah, I mean that's
too
true,
high.
Chris. What's another good example? I mean, a rewrite is also when you kind of hit the point. I mean,
I think Matt and I have a massive delay.
Yeah, it
I
doesn't.
heard
It's all
but
real time
very
for me as much
splotchy.
as it can be.
That was
yeah,
funny.
you're
It's
okay
like,
for me, Sean, but
I am several hours away.
we don't have any oceans to cross, though.
That's true.
Just a couple of flat provinces.
Yeah, but they have crappy weather. I think you were saying something about tech debt, when the tech debt exceeds certain points. I mean, to me, tech debt is your number one sign of refactor time. The more you've built up that sort of like stinky code, right? Where you can look at it and say, this could be better. I could, like, if you can look at it instantaneously and see that snippet, those like 50, 60 lines of code could be better, or these 3 files and how they relate to each other could be better, that's a quick refactor. That's a quick win. But like rewrites are really at the point where the road you've gone down has come to that blatant stop sign of you can go no further. Like you really can't jump the next hurdle, or to jump that next hurdle requires such a hacky or bizarre ad hoc solution that you're not comfortable with doing what needs to be done to get you there. If you're really feeling uncomfortable with that, I think that's the point where you can truly say, this needs a full rewrite.
So you're talking about that barrier to contribution being so high that you just literally, like some product person says, I can't wait for feature X21 to be done. They're like, I can't. It's going to take a month, or they can't even start.
Or you can officially get to the point where you can say, like, the amount of ad hoc solutions we've had to continuously add to keep going on this one entity, we now have no choice. We have to trash the whole thing and restart, because you've dug a hole so deep you can't get back out, right? Can't think of any good references right now.
We have another one. What's your biggest regret in terms of working with packages or patterns that turned out to be a big mistake?
That's an interesting question. I've written a lot of packages over the years. I've deleted a lot of them. I have abandoned a bunch of them. I think patterns that turned out to be a big mistake. The repository pattern got real messy real fast. That was a bad call. Because I was doing that for a while. I think what's another one that was a messy one? I
remember Quarks were messy, and I know that was on the service repository stuff, and I remember trying to work in that.
I don't know if there's ever been something I've written where I actually said, like, I deeply regret writing that. Because everything has generally been like a...
You're just too good.
Quarks was messy, but Quarks was a me attempting to make a CMS that was... It was almost like I was trying to do a headless CMS without doing a headless CMS. And it was, I think, because I wasn't really examining the real problem. I was excited about the concept of building something, and I just went with it, right? So that's not enough time planning, not enough time architecting, and then just continuously going with it. And I don't even know if anybody really used it ever outside of me. So I was fine with that thing dying when it did. and I've arguably been pretty okay with any time I've just ditched an app or rewrote a whole thing. One thing that I can say that one of the toughest things when it came to my code being deleted was I wrote a really cool organizational thing that, for lack of, like, I don't want to get into any details because I can't really talk about the topic of what it did, but it organized things and it did it in a very elegant way. And now I've been working on building a system that completely makes all of it completely obsolete. Like there's no value to any of it anymore.
Mm-hmm.
You gotta learn any new programming language? New language? I don't know if new language at all. I mean, I've been mostly dabbling with frameworks more than anything else. Like I might look into React this year, but that's only because people talk about it a lot and I don't really know anything about React.
You're talking about React.js, not React PHP,
yeah.
Right? Yeah.
React.js.
Yeah.
I don't know if, but like, I mean, maybe Go, but I've tinkered with Go and I very quickly said, yeah, I don't care. Because that didn't,
I don't know, deploying that single binary is pretty cool.
I think the concept of Go is cool, but to me, that's if I look at things from a technical standpoint and I look at the career I've built for myself for the past 12 years, I don't really see any value in me learning Go or Rust or any of those newer different languages. Because I just don't see me then jumping on the bandwagon with that new thing and then having to, ramp myself up with that community and everything else. I'm pretty I'm feeling pretty established in PHP at this point in my career, and JavaScript is just comes with the industry.
Yeah, you don't really have a choice if you're building web stuff, and you're not on like a team that has
dedicated front end. And even then, every team I've ever been on, you mostly have a variety of full stack developers working together.
Yeah.
Period. Like I've only worked at one company in my life that actually had people who only did front end. And it was only HTML, CSS. They didn't do anything with JavaScript. They were like, I don't know how to do anything in JavaScript, but I can make you a really nice looking web page. And I'm like,
but does it do anything?
Yeah. And then I have to go in and figure out what they did to make it do what it's supposed to do. Like, it was a really weird way of doing business.
Yeah. Huh. So maybe slightly off topic then. Do you see, as someone as you mentioned, like in pretty embedded in the PHP ecosystem, do you feel like there's any lack of demand for PHP stuff? Like the new language thing, sort of, there's an underlying question there of like, oh, is PHP the thing that you're going to just be able to use for the next 20 years or something? I mean, for our industry, we could probably program into our late 60s and it's like, my fingers are a little sore, but other than that, like,
I think every language has a different focus point, a different purpose, and a different solution it provides. I mean, I look at things in terms of like, in what sense have I hit limitations that PHP can't suffice? And even with the machine learning libraries and stuff like that are coming out now, you can still integrate with PHP. So what on earth, like, why do I have to look at a different language in order to solve the new problem, right? Because to me, the reason to look at a new language is because you have to solve a different problem, or a problem that you can't solve properly with the languages that you've kind of gotten, skilled with. And it can change here and there, unless you're just really excited to try something different, in which case, go ahead, have fun, like, no judgment. But from a business standpoint, I don't see myself being able to sell my skills better because I can stand there today and say, well, I'm really good with PHP and I'm kind of good with Go.
Right.
Right. Like, I just don't see somebody caring that much, because it also becomes because ultimately when you hire somebody who's going to be solving a problem in a specific area
Right.
the best they can. They're not going to hire me for a Go when I'm a better PHP developer.
Right. Yeah.
That's my thought.
They so is there stuff I maybe doubling down on the sort of new language that theme. Sean's just going to rejoin. He's having internet issues, but is there anything you feel that's missing from PHP? Speaking as like someone who's like, what could help you sell your PHP skill better that was in the language? Like, what would make you more productive personally? For me, I think of things like asynchronous programming, which isn't really possible in PHP to some extent. I know that there's ways to do it and stuff, but it can be really difficult to sometimes deal with that. Or the fact that like something, if I want to make a request within a request, it'll just sit there and hang. Like that can sometimes cause some pain, especially when dealing with things like, for example, dealing with a queue that's an HTTP based queue. You have to wait for that response. So that was one personally that I came across. I was like, I'd love to return early and then just let something die in the background, which you could do with Go, because you could just defer stuff, but you can't really do that with PHP. Is there stuff like that, which is like, hey, there's some problems here that are, the framework thing is sort of, icing on the cake, but what kind of ingredients does that cake need to like give you a better handle on your day-to-day tasks?
I think with what I work on and the clients that I work with, there is, for lack of better terms, there's literally nothing that I am personally lacking in PHP. There are more features built into PHP in today's world than I will ever necessarily. Any regrets from the cabin, like building it? I wish I am in love with this cabin. I love what I built. I'm very happy with it, but I'm moving in September to a bigger house, and I kind of wish I could pick it up and take it with me, but that would not work well. So I got to build a new one.
Hey.
Yeah, version 2.
Yeah.
But no, I mean,
it's going to be so much more performant.
I think if people are struggling with a language and saying that this language doesn't suffice, or it's missing key features for me to resolve a solution for my client or my needs, I think that's where you look into the different options, or maybe you look at ways in which you can contribute to the language itself. But like, I'd also just think the demon that we've created in the modern world of what customers expect from a system, no one language can do all. It's literally impossible. Like, Swift isn't going to do everything. It can do a lot of things, but it will not be doing everything. And that is across the board. PHP has come a long way and is ridiculously fast and can do a crazy amount of stuff, but like, it's never going to be the one size fits all tool or gain some features that just obscure other, ad hoc solutions.
Yeah. Sean, how's your connection? Are you back?
I think I'm back up to speed now, I hope.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah, well, you can always go back and watch the stream and see what you missed.
Yeah,
I would say, like, personally, as far as like PHP goes, like, I never had, there was things that bothered me in terms of, hey, this isn't as easy as it is in, other language B. But then again, like, language B, it's not nearly as easy to do things in PHP. Like, for example, just handling a stateful request is like the simplest thing ever in PHP. It's like, it's so people people hate on it because it's so crude in a certain way. It's such a crude synchronous approach to handling a request. But at the same time, it's like, I know that this request is like this one request. I don't have to deal with like anything else, which is like beautiful. But then in other languages, it can be a bit more tough to sort of break that down and really deal with stateful things in that way. But as far as like problems that I personally have come across with like PHP is like most of the time it's an architecture thing. Like I mentioned, having a queue, like having a queue opens up a ton of options for you in terms of like how you want to handle your programming. It's like, I don't need PHP to do queue things. I will just reach for a queue in which there are a dozen high quality, mature options for PHP that are definitely, they're definitely going to be able to be up to the task. And if you want things like interoperability between languages, like that's one way to do it. So, I mean, I don't know. It's great when things just get faster and like, that kind of stuff, or the tooling gets slightly better.
I'm drinking 40 Creek Canadian whiskey, actually.
Hey, nice.
I am waiting for a bottle of 12-year-old Lagavulin to be delivered to my local LCBO. And there was another one I ordered, but I can't remember the name of it right now.
What about you, James?
Scotch. Oh, I was drinking Maker's Mark.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I'm not a huge bourbon guy, but I like some Maker's Mark. I like some Bullet. I do have a bunch of Scotch. I'm staring over here because I'm staring at like my cabinet, my booze cabinet. That's where I keep all of Daddy's medicine. So yeah.
For a little while behind that wicker basket were 4 bottles lined up, and then couple of them went to friends. But what you can't see is over here is a wine fridge. With I want to say 30 bottles of wine in there right now.
Nice. So this is really just an alcohol cabin, not a programming work cabin. This is just a box for liquor.
Yeah. It's a small house. What can I say?
Yeah. All the essentials.
Yeah, I mean, we were earlier in the show. We were talking about us going out and having some road pops, and now we're talking about some cabin pops.
Yeah.
And
the water cooler's right here.
So the cabin thing. So I have noticed like a couple of. I mean, obviously with everything going on, but especially I think in Ontario specifically, I've noticed a bunch of programmers. The one who comes to mind is Wes Boss. I don't know if you know who Wes Boss is, but he also built a little. He was calling his more like a shed, but it was one of these things where it was basically just a single door, 4 walls, whatever, simple roof, insulated, obviously, because you kind of need that when it's minus 20. And I've noticed a couple other people ordering sort of those prefab sheds that are like 10 by 12 or something, like big enough for a nice desk and like kind of the setup you have there. It looks like you have AC in yours too.
Yeah, so, I framed mine by hand.
Oh, nice.
Yeah,
I used to be a general contractor before I got into coding, so I know how to build houses relatively. But I built this one. I had my brother and my dad come over, and I think it took us 2 afternoons to frame the whole thing. It's 9 by 12, and I want to say it's a 4-pitch roof, and 1 door, 2 windows, air conditioner, 2 by 6 walls with R20 insulation, full vapor barrier, vinyl, like snap flooring, so it looks like a nice wood flooring in here. It's a very nice cabin.
Is it just raised on? Is it raised on the blocks, or is it like a slab?
I built I sectioned off an area and just used 4x4s, stacked 4x4s to build like a little sandbox kind of effect. Filled that with gravel to be the underlay. Then we did foam insulation under the footing here, and then I built a deck that wraps around the cabin, so that I could put a little shed out behind it, so you can walk on a little deck. There's like a little 3.5-foot deck right out front door.
Nice.
Which is nice.
Yeah, it sounds great.
Yeah, I'm very pleased with the way it turned out, and very bummed that I'm not taking it with me, but my mother-in-law is
I'm
moving
sure
to
added
this
a
house,
couple
so I'm going to
bucks.
be here all the time.
I was gonna say, I'm sure it added a couple bucks to the sale price. Having a private office in the outside,
just a
fully
few.
insulated.
Just a few.
Yeah.
Oh, and it has a hard line network to it.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
Yeah. Because if you're going to dig a trench.
Yeah. Well, you had to
Put all
dig
the
trench
wires
for
in
electrical anyway, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
You don't always have to. Sometimes you can do a raised pipe, but
yeah.
trench is usually more effective.
Right.
But
Cool.
yeah, I'm going to do the same thing at the other one, although I'm probably going to build that as a full garage and do a loft for the office. But that's in 2 years. I can't afford to do that anytime soon.
So if you guys want, go to Matt Lance's Twitter. He's got pictures, and my buddy Eric and I, we were teasing him all summer about it. It was a good time.
Yep. And they'll probably tease me about the renovations I'm going to do at that house with new flooring, painted doors, whole new kitchen, vanities in the bathrooms, the whole thing.
9 yards. Yeah.
The whole thing. Yeah. I might even be able to squeeze in a carport this summer, but I don't know yet. I got to look at budget for that. I'm active during the summer.
Yeah. Cool. Well,
awesome. Thanks,
since
guys.
we veered off programming, I think we're ready to wrap up here. What do you say, Sean?
Well, we have one question. What's the Twitter account again?
Matty, MATTYLANTZ.
Let me share my screen real quick. All right, so wrapping up, just wanted to thank our sponsors, which I guess, Sean, I don't know if I think there's another slide in here for the rocket plan stuff, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll jump to that. So yeah, we just want to let people know we still are doing these. Obviously, we haven't been able to stick to the normal programming this year, but hopefully now that we're out of the Christmas season and all that fun stuff, we can get back to some more consistent stuff. We're first week of March, something like that. But hopefully we'll get to more consistent schedule. And I think people seem to like the YouTube format, so I think we'll just keep doing that for now. I don't see any reason to try to sneak in any in-person stuff yet. Hopefully by the end of the year, maybe we'll be able to do something. But as of right now, we'll just stick to the YouTube stuff. I think you probably agree with that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely.
So I think hopefully maybe learn something that you can make you money tomorrow, even if it's just some ideas about programming or some things or some philosophies to take away, which would be pretty great. Our PHP Storm giveaway. So make sure you comment in the chat. Put your email in there if you're not part of the meetup group, but please join the meetup group. You'll get notifications on when these events actually go live. You'll get links in advance, which can help you actually set reminders on YouTube, which is really handy. So we pre-bake this URL. So this URL had been up for a week or so, or 2 weeks or whatever. So you could sit here and wait for the whole event to start. So you can join early. You can take advantage of that. You can share it around. Makes it really helpful. So join the meetup group and mention yourself in the chat. Mention your email in the chat. We'll pick someone from that group to give our PHP Storm to. Please remember, please use this license if you get it. And we should also say it's not just for PHP Storm, right? It's for any JetBrains product.
Yeah.
So if you're into the aforementioned Go and you'd like to try GoLand, maybe you can try that. There's also WebStorm, I believe, and a couple other ones that are there for you. Isn't there a really good database one?
Data. I forgot the name of it, but yeah, you're right.
Yeah, so there's lots of good stuff there on the JetBrains stuff. So even if you have PHP Storm, why not try a different JetBrains product? You obviously they have good stuff. They spend the time and they make these awesome applications. So why not give another one a whirl? So if you win the license, let us know, or try anything there. But you have to use it. That's the main point. If you don't use it, they'll stop giving them to us, which screws up the whole situation. So yeah. Sean, maybe you want to hit this quickly?
Yeah, sure. So again, Rocket Plan. If you know anybody, an iOS dev, Laravel dev, quality assurance, then eventually we'll be getting into Android development. React JS is our front end. We'll eventually be hiring more people there. Uh, Growing this team from a small to medium to large business. And one of the things that I forgot to mention is what exactly it is. Like you see the picture there, we have an application and a mobile app. Essentially, where this idea started is if you have a restoration business or you're a contractor for a construction company. Actually, a perfect example is down in Dallas, where they had the snowstorm and a lot of damage to apartments and housing. There's a lot of restoration companies down there, and they're assessing the damage, and then they're creating insurance reports and hiring contractors and managing their time, all that kind of stuff. So you can see in the iPhone picture there, it's taking an infrared picture, and the darker it is, the more purple bluish it is, it's colder and possibly had water damage. So the app will allow you to take pictures, record, the dimensions of the room, the damage, and all that stuff. And that's essentially what our app does in a nutshell right now. And the outcome of that is a report that goes to insurance, the time tracking and payments for contractors, and a whole bunch more stuff. So if you're interested in helping us, build this team, scale it, and grow it, and write some awesome code, would love to talk with you. The only people that aren't allowed to join the company are Matt Lance.
Sure.
That's fair. I mean,
I can't compete with Fiverr.
No.
Yeah, if you're someone who would like to get involved in the meetup, if you want to sponsor or present, just let us know. You can reach us on the meetup group as well. If you want to go on there, we're also on the YVR Dev Slack. You can hit us up on Twitter, PHP Vancouver. Remember to use the hashtag VanPHP if you have anything to contribute to the conversation, or you want to share something about the conversation we had today. Thank you, and see you in a month.
Thank you. Thank you, Matt.
Thanks so much, Matt.
Thanks.